Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and it's Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. This week feels more transitional than I think that it actually is. Sure, we got a new number one and a sizable number of new arrivals, and it's not an album bomb week, and we are indeed changing seasons going into the fall. But I don't know, what we're getting on the Hot 100 right now doesn't exactly seem built to last, which means while I won't exactly call the new entries here precisely bad, although some of them are, I don't exactly think that this week's all that good either. But of course, the big story here starts with our new number one, of which I've been predicting for the past several weeks, Girls Like You by Maroon 5 featuring Cardi B. And let's be blunt, the only reason it's at number one is because it's on top on the radio and it's a mostly stable week propped up in other categories. It is absolutely a weak number one, and I can see it being very vulnerable going forward, although not to In My Feelings by Drake, sliding down to number two as it loses in all categories, especially on the radio. And this opens up to our first new top 10 entry, and one I never thought would break this high, Killshot by Eminem at number 3. Yeah, the YouTube was record-breaking and got pretty impressive sales, but it doesn't exactly have on-demand streaming, and radio does not touch diss tracks like this. So in other words, it will drop out of the top 10 very quickly, but it still was a pretty considerable disruption. And then other things started getting weird in the top 10, like Lucid Dreams by Juice WRLD rising up to number 4 thanks to a good week on the radio and solid streaming, which apparently Better Now by Post Malone didn't quite have, as both sales and radio softened, and it never had great streaming down at number 5. Now this shoves back I Like It by Cardi B featuring Bad Bunny and J Balvin down to number 6, but given how much it's bleeding across the board, that's not all that surprising. Hell, I expected it to be overtaken by I Love It by Kanye West and Lil Pump, which only fell one slot to number 7 thanks to insane on-demand streaming and little else. Kept it above Fifi by 6ix9ine featuring Nicki Minaj and Murda Beast though, as it fell down to number 8 because despite good streaming, the radio is not on board and the sales are really falling away. Then we got Sicko Mode by Travis Scott at number 9. Not exactly a good week on sales here, but the streaming is strong and radio has gotten on board, so I predict this to hold out a little bit longer, at least until the video drops. Finally, and to my astonishment that they actually broke the top 10 after a long climb to the top, Youngblood by 5 Seconds of Summer hits number 10 thanks to a great sales week and radio giving this a major push, and that actually means I expect this to stick around, so thank God it actually grew on me. It's a good song. Now on the flip side, we do need to talk about our losers and dropouts, and we do have a few big ones in the latter category, with Mine by Bozzy finally making its exit along with Tibote from Casper Majiko, Neo Garcia, Darrell, Nicky Jam, Ozuna, and Bad Bunny. Both songs will make the year-end list for 2018 on the Hot 100, and will make opposite year-end lists from me, so stay tuned for that in a couple months. Also, I'm upset by Drake being an early exit, just shy of the points it'll need for the year-end list, and I'm not gonna complain about that whatsoever, because the song sucks. But really, if you're looking at some of these losers, there are a fair few songs that appear pretty compromised right now, like Ape Shit by the Carters falling down to 83, and Mercy by Brett Young going to 78. Granted, country as a whole didn't really have a good week, as a seasonal shift meant that Sunrise, Sunburn, Sunset by Luke Bryan fell to 51, Hooked by Dylan Scott lost all his gains from last week to 58, Drowns the Whiskey by Jason Aldean featuring Miranda Lambert slid down to 72, and Life Changes by Thomas Rhett fell down to 71, even though that song's barely country. The rest, well, let's get the remnants of Eminem's album bomb out of the way, as Fall dropped down to 46, The Ringer hit 59, Not Alike with Royce da 5'9" dropped at 94, and Kamikaze crashed at 99. And then you had gains losing traction, like Barbie Dreams by Nicki Minaj sputtering back to 57, and You Say by Lauren Daigle falling down to 64, as well as Self Care by Mac Miller losing off the debut last week down to 66. The last few, pretty scattered. Side Effects by The Chainsmokers and Emily Warren crashed down at 88, Solo by Clean Bandit and Demi Lovato hit 91, and BB by 6ix9ine featuring Anuel AA continues to flop down at 86, showing that 6ix9ine's wave of hype might be hitting the rocks again. But what's kind of awkward is that I'm not seeing what's replacing any of this. Yes, Cry Pretty by Carrie Underwood came back to the charts at 90. Yes, the album isn't flopping like I expected in my review, but she's not really getting a radio push here either, and streaming's not really holding up her singles. And then beyond that, we only had 3 gains this week. One is That's On Me by Yella Beezy at 69, which just seems to be taking up space because it's not that memorable. And the last 2 are riding gains from last week, with Thunderclouds by Labyrinth Sia and Diplo up to 67, 37, and Mo Bamba by Sheck West rising up to 42. Can we not make this incompetent song a thing, please? But alright, fine. Not a lot of gains, but we do have a healthy crop of new arrivals, so let's start off with number 100, Noticed by Lil Mosey.
I got link, it's on 40 in my right car. Bitches change, they act like I ain't noticed. Get that money, nigga, that my main focus. With 223, and you act like you don't notice. Go part of beam, and my niggas always rolling.
Another week, another SoundCloud rapper, who in this case isn't even out of high school, but somehow netted a record deal through Interscope and Universal. Does that not seem somewhat desperate to you if he's not a plant, regardless of whether or not the song is good? And you know what, it'd be one thing if the sound, or the content, or the delivery was interesting, but nope. Another by-the-numbers trap song with mushy vocals, by-the-numbers content, and admittedly some decent synth work, utterly crushed by the fact that the song is just completely unbelievable. You don't have any guns, kid. You don't even have a license, probably, and there's no way in hell you're even capable of taking my girl. Come on, I can't take this seriously. I'm not buying this, and I get the feeling that the label won't be able to push it that far. So, next. Number 97, Best Shot by Jimmie Allen.
Girl, you know I'm not, but I'll love you with everything I got. Girl, I'll give you my best shots.
So I'll freely admit I wasn't really familiar with Jimmie Allen before hearing this song, and upon my first few listens, I wasn't seeing a lot that really differentiated it from any number of lightweight bro country adjacent love songs that have pop crossover potential. But digging a little deeper, I found Jimmie Allen to be more interesting than I expected. For one, he's been in Nashville for over a decade now, working as a songwriter behind the scenes, and now with this as his solo breakthrough single, there is a level of refinement and poise that reflects somebody who's been working a long time in order to get here, including production emphasizing some stronger acoustic tones and not overselling the backbeat in an expansive mix. Probably only my nitpick there. And yeah, the lyrics, they're not all that special for this sort of love song, but Jimmie Allen's a better than average singer, the lyrics aren't precisely bad, and the more melodic focus actually stuck with me more than I thought it would. So yeah, it's actually pretty good. I'll keep my eye out there for more from Jimmie Allen, because this is good. Nice work. Number 96, Leave Me Alone by Flipp Dinero.
Bitch, you dumb as fuck. Bitch, you done it what? Leave me alone. Drunk as fuck. Bitch, you dumb as fuck. Running out the box down. Leave me alone. Yeah.
So apparently this song is taking off because it got a cosigns from a bunch of NBA players, and Drake cited it as an influence behind Scorpion, which given how that album turned out, I wouldn't exactly say it's a good thing, most because this song's not very good at all. Now don't get me wrong, Flipp Dinero does have a way around a hook, and the actual structure of the song is surprisingly decent. He can ride a flow and connect his bars together, but the actual content is a really petulant kiss-off to a girl who won't stop calling him, that he repeatedly stresses was somebody he actually liked, just got incredibly annoyed with. And I don't know if it's the overweight beat, the pileup of vocal effects that masquerades as a melody, or how Flipp Dinero sounds like his voice is just shredded singing the hook and just does not have the body in order to sell it convincingly, but despite being kind of catchy, it can get really grating really quickly, especially when you dig into a little bit deeper into the content. It's just kind of ugly. So yeah, not exactly that good. Next, number 76, Pretty Little Fears by Black featuring J. Cole.
Say it all if you want. Or could you tell me like it is? Pretty little fears. Music to my ears.
So I was expecting more Black songs to chart this week. His album just dropped, it seems to be doing some pretty decent numbers, but it looks like the only crossover song we're getting is the one with J. Cole, which is not one of the singles that was being prepped for release. Now, one could make the argument that this was the popular highlight from fans, and I don't know. Look, I see the appeal for this brand of love song, but I'm not exactly wowed by it either. Black has never brought a ton of unique charisma or clever wordplay to the table. I mean, the second verse here is alright, and the hook isn't bad, but it's nothing extraordinary or all that special or that I haven't heard it before. And honestly, I wouldn't say J. Cole's verse is all that either, especially with that flubbed rhyme right in the middle of it for no good reason. Pair it with a very minimalist patter of the drippy keys and some of the production there, and it just feels kind of undercooked, a little scattered. Not terrible, but not exactly exceptional or noteworthy either. Sorry. Number 47, Falling Down by Lil Peep and XXXTENTACION. This feels wrong. And no, it doesn't have anything to do with me not being a fan of either late artist. This goes back to the whole issue of posthumous releases that I've been bringing up for years on this show. But this, if possible, was even more gross, because Lil Peep was not at all a fan of XXXTENTACION and actually refused to work with them given the allegations and charges. And considering this alternate version was put together after Lil Peep's death and against the wishes of his friends and family, at least initially, they've kind of changed things around now, that's an industry thing, and hell, was put together and released by I Love McConan of all people, who took off his own feature on the original version of Lil Peep's song for X, and you could tell this was assembled from fragments, as the bass and muddy guitars sound like a Lil Peep instrumental, as does his hook, but all the verse and interlude content is pulled from unformed verses and samples from other studio sessions from XXXTENTACION, using vague contextual elements to pull together a sense of grief in retrospect, when in reality, this was done to drive up cheap buzz off of label name recognition. It's cheap, it's a blatantly exploitative, and you just know that somebody's getting a check off this, likely I Love McConan, but it's blood money that'll likely never be repaid to the right people. It's a lousy song, it's absolutely gross, it adds nothing to the artistic legacy of both acts. Let's forget this as soon as possible. Number 45, Better by Khalid. So I'll admit to being intrigued by what Khalid is trying to push with this sophomore project, because I liked On the Way, and this is apparently the follow-up, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. Khalid leaning into a more lethargic and auto-tuned lane in his delivery, it might be the trendy thing to do, but it doesn't exactly make the song any more interesting, especially with the very underwhelming content, especially if he's trying to sell this as a better moment. And when you factor in the desaturated pianos, the misty swell of arranged instrumentation, it's trying for this sort of quiet opulence that it just doesn't quite nail. And while I kind of like the Daft Punk-esque synthetic vocal layers on the outro, that just feels like an undercooked idea that's tacked on at the end. And I think if Khalid wanted to sell a more visceral outro as he tries on the final chorus, he could have done it in a slightly better way. I don't know, it's not a bad song, but again, not great either. Next up, number 38, New Patek by Lil Uzi Vert.
You a bad bitch, then we can link. Hit the shower, you might stay. Bitch baggity on my green. And she said Lil Uzi so great. How you deal with all that hate? Shut the bitch, now give me my green.
At this point, I feel like all the publicity around some of Lil Uzi Vert's antics have attracted more attention than his actual music and content. And since I don't like any of his music or content, I'm a little shocked this debuted as high as it did. Granted, I would say I was surprised that it broke this high because it's also a pretty lousy song, where you get Lil Uzi Vert's nasal yammer about all his flexing and brand names, saying the bad bitch needs to go take a shower because she stinks, how he doesn't wake up in the morning for his cereal, like that's relevant, how he's an octopus who ices out his tentacles, not really great metaphor there, an attempt at telling a story about hooking up with this girl who only reminds me how sloppy his flow is, which he then says that people are trying to steal, even despite the fact that he jacked most of his flow from Migos. He's now complaining about people trying to steal his flow, since people from Toronto treat him like Drake, which is emphatically not the case given I'm from here, and then tacks on a fourth verse that's basically recycling the second verse because apparently he wanted to make a song that was nearly 6 minutes saying fuck all. Seriously, this is an utterly worthless song, or maybe only a token Naruto reference to boot. In other words, skip it. Next up, number 30, Wake Up in the Sky by Gucci Mane, Bruno Mars, and Kodak Black.
You can't tell me I ain't fly. I know I'm super fly. I know I'm super fly.
Am I the only one who is a little bit weirded out by this combination of artists? I know Gucci Mane is trying for a more respectable image these days, but seeing him recruit Bruno Mars for a hook, it's odd, especially as this isn't really a retro throwback that Bruno Mars has worked with. And then to see any of them working with Kodak Black given his reputation, yeah, I wasn't sure how well this is going to come together. And it really doesn't come together. If I was Gucci Mane who shelled out a lot of money for a Bruno Mars hook, I would ask for my money back. Bruno, he does not sound like he remotely cares about this hook. And even though it's trying for a more lethargic flexing vibe, a lot of that this week, the melodic structure is very awkward and bleary with no real momentum. And yeah, Gucci Mane's not really really bringing much in terms of content, but at least the opulence would kind of work until you get Kodak Black, who's trying to bring a more rougher vibe, and not only does his crooning continue to sound awful, he's talking about the smell of his piss. So yeah, this didn't work. Let's move on. Number 28, Drip Too Hard by Lil Baby and Gunna.
Off this way, doing all these shows. I've been on the road, I don't care where I go, long as I get paid. Bad little vibe, she been on my mind. Soon as I get back, she can slay. Do this all the time, this ain't no surprise. Every other night, another movie get made.
And on the flip side, this is the sort of collaboration you almost expect. Mostly because I'm fairly certain neither of them have the personality to carry even another by-the-numbers trap song, which is exactly what this is. Yeah, there might be something kind of interesting going on with some of the busier production, and I don't think Lil Baby has a bad flow here, but why is he referencing how he doesn't read comments as if he's a YouTuber? And then we get Gunna with a line about how he feels like a child. I got boogers in the face. I know he's talking about his watch, but can we stop using boogers as slang for jewels? It sounds really stupid. Let's get honest about this. And on that note, why are you bragging that you can't spell the names of your own designers? But beyond that, and the somewhat catchy flows, this might wind up as one of the more tolerable trap songs that debut this week. It's not interesting. I'm sorry. And I can't see myself going back to it, just won't stick around. Next, and finally, number 3, Killshot by Eminem.
Who with your corny lines? Slim your roll. Out Kelly, ooh, but I'm 45 and I'm still outselling you. By 29, I had 3 albums that it blew. Now let's talk about something I don't really do. Go in someone's daughter's mouth stealing food, but you're a fucking molehill. Now I'ma make a mountain out of you.
So there's a lot to unpack with this, especially when I said on Twitter that by the standards of diss tracks I've heard this year, I consider it decent. Enough of a knockout blow to handle Machine Gun Kelly, but beyond that, I wasn't really blown away, especially in comparison to what we got from Pusha T and Drake earlier this year, 2 heavyweights going at it. But here's the thing, we've been spoiled with some great diss tracks in 2018, and I'm more knowledgeable about Eminem's history in this department than most people are. See, I grew up on a few diss compilations that were independently put together that tried to make sense of Eminem's back and forth feuds with a lot of people. So not only do I remember cuts like Nail in the Coffin, but also songs like The Sauce and Cannabitch and Quitter Hit 'Em Up, and my personal favorite, Bully. But the reason why I like that song so much was because not only it felt like a well-structured, genuinely catchy song, which you don't get often with diss tracks, but also because Eminem exposed all the industry drivers behind Ja Rule and Benzino at the time, which was laying out the crossfire was way more compelling, almost presented Eminem as an industry insider. That's why while I can appreciate the MGK takedown, what was way more interesting to me from Killshot were the jabs taken at Puff, who incidentally, also the biggest backer behind Joe Budden right now. Now that said, a diss track doesn't technically need great production or a hook or the sheer level of layered insight that Pusha T delivered on the story of Adidon, and in terms of pure wordplay, Eminem's in a different ballpark on Killshot than MGK was on Rap Devil, and he's enough of a scientist here to utterly dismantle him, between M giving him a career to then destroy it, to the Halsey shots, which, yeah, that was kind of funny, to just having the brusque irritation in his delivery by having to smack him down. So yeah, is it a diss track that would put among Eminem's best? Honestly, debatable, probably not, but it did what it had to do to MGK, and it was clever enough to get around the structural limitations that come with diss tracks, and let's be honest, most people are not talking about that new EP that MGK just dropped. So on that note, yeah, not a good week, but Killshot is head and shoulders above everything. It's the best. And I'm giving honorable mention to Best Shot by Jimmie Allen. Nice surprise with that song. Hoping to hear more. A lot of shots going on this week. Worst, yeah, fallen down by the late Lil Peep, and XXXTENTACION runs away with that. I honestly don't even blame the artist. I blame the label managers trying to get a little bit more cash out of them, and it's just gross. But dishonorable mentions going to New Patek by Lil Uzi Vert, mostly for being overlong and generally kind of excruciating. Next week, honestly, no idea. We could get a new number 1, who knows? And we're heading into the last 2 months of the Billboard year, so we'll have to see. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.